walk together. In a time of crisis or in a time of peace, this is a story of 8 billion beating hearts. We share this one fragile planet, the air we breathe, the land we walk on, and the oceans we swim in. Imagine borders that surround us, some more fortified than others. Borders for many of us define our lives today. For global capital and those with the right passports, borders are easy. For the global masses, these borders tell us where we can and cannot go. For the world's 2 billion Muslims, 1 out of every 4 people on this earth, our lives are interconnected by the diaspora of our hearts, of our families, and a spiritual lineage that stretches back 14 centuries. But we are only told stories that put us in boxes to police our identities. What if the full story was told about our faith, about our lives, about our cultures? The story of our love for humanity and our stories as protectors of the world. This is for the future builders, the dreamers, those who want to escape from the futility of generations past destroying our shared world. Media has been built to divide us. We ask, what if it was built to connect? This is a manifesto written across screens. We need you. Beyond languages, beyond cultures, beyond faiths, beyond all barriers and borders, we need each other. This is for all of us.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Peace and blessings to you all. I'm Dustin Cron, the founder of the Center for Global Muslim Life. We're here with Launch Good for the 7th day of our Hajj of Our Hearts program. Today, we're going to talk about the idea of racial justice in Islam and the meaning of the Hajj pilgrimage. First, we want to thank our sponsors, Dar al-Salam, Tariq al-Haramain, Saffron Road, UIF, the Islamic Shura Council of Southern California, and Penny Appeal USA. There's also an Umrah giveaway taking place. If you go to if you join the Dhul Hijjah Challenge, you will be automatically entered into that. I think this program is really, really important. First, we also wanted to mention that to support the Center for Global Muslim Life, you can go to launchgood.com/digital media DMA Academy. So we're starting this digital media academy because the reality is that a lot of our community, when this COVID crisis began and everybody had to quickly move online, not all of our organizations were equipped to do that. So we're creating a digital media academy, you know, with the nearly 20 years of production experience that I have as a filmmaker and as a PR strategist, digital media strategist, where we're going to take organizations from throughout the United States, from around the world, and really train them in digital media strategy, and they can actually work on a campaign for the future, for the coming year. But for today, we really wanted to talk about this idea of racial justice. And part of that academy also is that racial justice organizations, we have scholarships for them. And that's part of what the Launch Good campaign goes to. So we hope that you all can support that. Thinking about racial justice in Islam and Hajj, I think so much of the beautiful writing that has been written about what the Hajj means and the coming together of people around the world, that so much of that, those of us who've been in Mecca, those of us who've been in Medina know that is so much of it is about Allah. It's not necessarily about us as people. It's about the all-encompassing reality that Allah gives us when we're in those spaces. It's beautiful to see everyone together, but we know we have the very hard work to do as a community to take things to the next level. One quick recommendation in thinking about the Hajj is this book, the autobiography of Betty Shabazz, where, a lot of people know the story of Brother Malcolm and the transformation that he created in the world. But Sister Betty kept his work going on, their legacy together going for 40 plus years after Malcolm was assassinated. And there's a really incredible story in this book about her Hajj that she took just months after the assassination. So I highly recommend that people read that. I'll put a link to the article about Hajj in the comments. First, we want to bring in our brother, Imam Khalid Latif from the Islamic Center of NYU to reflect with us about about the ideas of racial justice in this time. Imam Khalid, are you there? Imam Khalid, come in.
Assalamu alaikum. Walaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Yeah, it's beautiful to have you here. Thank you for joining us. I know that you go on Hajj and Umrah often. And so, you know, what is it like for you this year being at home, but also if you could reflect for us on, you know, like I said, there's people say so much about the unity of the Muslims that takes place there in Mecca, but then what is the reality of the very hard work that we as a community have to do to manifest true racial justice in our world?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. Bismillah. Bismillah wa alhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Thank you so much, Dustin, for having me here today. And thank you for all those who are joining in. You know, I was blessed to go for Hajj the first time in 2005. And last year, we started a Hajj program through our Islamic Center at New York University, where we took about 140 people from all over the country to perform the Hajj pilgrimage. And so much of what we hear at times can be quite intangible, but once you experience it, you can really see how the narratives of individuals like Sister Betty, like Malcolm, may Allah's mercy be upon both of them, like so many who describe and depict what it is that they have gone through, is something that is undeniable. It's something that experientially is transformative, and not just transformative of externals, but transformative of internals that then impact how we see and perceive things that are around us. In answering this idea, or kind of reflecting on racial justice and how it factors into the Hajj journey, I think it's important to understand how gatherings of the divine function within Islam as a tradition more broadly. You have a notion that is constructed within Islam that qualifies many things as being of God. Mecca is considered to be a house of God. You have a messenger of God, a book of God. And fundamentally, when you have any of these things that are of God, a house of God, a messenger of God, a book of God, a person of God, however it is that you utilize that construct of God, the idea is that its purpose is not meant to draw attentiveness to the object, but it's meant to draw attentiveness to God. And so a pilgrimage that is being done for the sake of God to the house of God is not one that is meant to draw attentiveness towards anything other than, again, towards God. And when you have a religion like Islam that is heavily God-centric, it does not tolerate egocentricity in any capacity, and where it puts Allah at the center, it puts the divine at the center, it now creates access points that remove the individual from living in a sphere where they believe everything revolves around them, and creates an entity as a centering point that now gives access to individuals of all backgrounds to be connected through the creator of everything. If you understand the paradigm of gatherings that are divine in their nature, in contrast to gatherings that are human in their nature, God's gatherings tend to be rooted on principles of inclusivity, not exclusivity. Whereas when you look at human gatherings, they tend to be rooted on principles of exclusivity, not inclusivity. I'll give you an example. I work at New York University. I used to work at Princeton University. And in my first couple of days at Princeton University, I was 24 years old, and I was on the campus anecdotally giving an insight into this idea of exclusivity. And at 24 on Princeton's campus, the first days that I'm there, I'm meeting people like Cornel West and Toni Morrison, and here's one of the founders of Amazon.com, and here's somebody who's responsible for the resurgence of China's economy. And I started to think, what is it that I'm really doing here? And then a week into it, I started to get letters from alumni that say, we don't want Muslims at Princeton. We don't want your Sharia law at Princeton. Somebody like you should never be at a place like this. And that sense of exclusivity was quite rampant. The way the university structure functions is not necessarily about who it lets in, but who it keeps out. And at its most fundamental level, the idea is not about certain SATs or GPAs or extracurriculars, but rooted in a sphere of where and how they start to limit who it is that has access. Because if a place like Princeton started to let everybody into it, it wouldn't be Princeton anymore. And the maintenance of its reputation necessitates that sense of exclusivity. And that's how a lot of human gatherings function. That so much about how we identify ourselves is based off of who we share space with, who we let have dinner at our home, who it is that we would let our children consider being in a relationship with, being married to, who it is that we even pray with in other places of prayer. When you contrast it to gatherings that are divine, you can have anyone and everyone from all walks of life in Allah's house, in God's house, and it doesn't take anything away from the majesty of the divine. And then when you deepen this idea of what it is that most of us are rooted in, institutionally, the presence of supremacy as the base structure upon which everything is built upon in the United States. It's not just simply about keeping out people who don't have certain SAT scores, or somebody sending me a letter that says, you don't belong here, but the systems and what it is that they have in play. At the end of that year, in 2007, I was invited to be a participant in a graduation ceremony that takes place on Princeton's campus and campuses all over the country called the Pan-African Baccalaureate, where brown and black students, mostly students who self-identify as black, and then mostly African-American students, at least on Princeton's campus, have their own unofficial graduation ceremony that's taking place. And this is in the backdrop of a broader parade that happens on Princeton's campus called the P-Raid, where alumni from way back when march in white and orange pinstripe suits to celebrate their Princeton pride. And you have the oldest alums walking first, and then slowly it gets to the most recent alums. And literally decades pass where it's just elderly white men. Somewhere along the line, you might see a sprinkle of some color, you might see some women, but by the end of it, even the most recent ones are still white men. And as I'm standing at this Pan-African Baccalaureate, the valedictorian of that ceremony gets on the mic and she says to her peers and her friends and family that's there that just because we are at Princeton does not mean we are of Princeton. And we should not forget what so many had to struggle through in order for us to be where it is that we are right now. So our being here should not ever be something that's self-serving, our own individual needs being met. But it should be about the collective movement forward of our entire community. And now you think about that being embedded in healthcare, the prison system, education across the board, immigration, Department of Justice, each and every system built in a way that is about exclusivity. And then you adopt that within the experience of governmental apparatus pretty much everywhere. And now you go to a gathering of the divine, like the Hajj pilgrimage, and everyone and anyone is all standing side by side. I had conversations with people in Mecca who came from different countries, who couldn't speak my languages and I couldn't speak their languages, but we were still able to communicate with one another. because we weren't talking simply from here, we were connected and speaking from here. That you see and you feel a distinction that is most unique from what it is that is typically engaged on a day-to-day level, both individually as well as structurally. And there, at least for the part that is Allah's gathering, you find the presence of what it really means to be a part of something that is not about simply shared externals, shared race, shared ethnicity, shared class, but it becomes about shared internals, shared values, shared hearts. And as you're going through a process of detoxing from capitalistic, patriarchic notions that render at the combination of supremacist mindset that has you idolizing the self to such a way that it removes from you the ability to relate and empathize and really think from the presence of your heart, you now start to feel a different sense of connection and a different sense of relation that does not become dismissive of people's realities to the extent that you say that I adopt a vision that has me deny or erase what it is that you go through. But you start to build real love. You start to adopt a true sense of solidarity that's rooted in actual engagement with someone from a different background. And it starts to be transformative. This last year when we went for Hajj, we had really amazing experiences. Alhamdulillah. And may Allah accept the Hajj for all those who have gone in the past, and may Allah accept the Hajj of those who intended to go this year and could not go because of the pandemic. And may Allah end any of the oppression and injustice that is coming out of the countries that put on the Hajj and host it. When we went last year, in Islam as a tradition, rainfall is considered to be a mercy. It's a really important time, and a time that one is taught that they should pray because prayers are more accepted during the time of rain. And in a place like Saudi Arabia, it doesn't rain that much, but it had rained in Mecca while we were there. It rained in Medina, what we call the illuminated city, the city of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. It rained in a place called Mina, where the Hajj pilgrims all gather and situate themselves as a base while they're going to the other stations of the Hajj pilgrimage over the course of the days of Hajj. And one of the places that it rained was also a place called Arafah, where on the 9th day of Dhul Hijjah, the month of Hajj, every person who goes for Hajj goes and stands at this open plain that's called the plain of Arafah. And you see millions of people all dressed the same, standing together with God being their connection point in a sea that is just most beautiful. And when we went last year, we were standing in our tent and the rain just started to fall. And you found this deafening silence go across the plain as everybody turned to face in the direction of Mecca. They raised their hands to the skies in supplication, in prayer, because nobody wanted to miss the opportunity of the blessing of that moment. And it felt as if with every raindrop that hit the roof of every tent that every pilgrim was standing in, Allah was just accepting another prayer that had been uttered again and again and again. And when it was all done and we were getting moved to the next place of our journey, there was a young man who was in the group that I was leading that went with me to freshen our wudu, a ritual washing that we do in order to enter into a state of ritual purity. And when we were returning from it, there was an elderly man who was standing in front of us who had also just washed up and readied himself. But he had completely removed what we call the ihram, his Hajj clothing, 2 unstitched cloth that he's wearing on his upper body and his lower body with nothing else underneath it. So he was standing essentially with no clothes on, and his Hajj clothing was hanging from a tree branch next to him. And this is a man who is old enough to be your grandfather, if you want to picture him in your head. And all around him now, there are different people who are looking at him, watching him, seeing what's going on. Some are pointing and smiling. Some are a little angry. Some are disgusted. Some are yelling at the people who are making faces, reprimanding them. And the young man who is with me, he says to me that you take off the top of your ihram, your Hajj clothes. I'll take off the top of mine, and we'll go cover him and we'll give him some privacy. And I turned and made prayer to God saying that, Ya Allah, give me a heart like this young man who understands that real spirituality is about impacting your own decisions and choices, who saw everything that everybody else was seeing, but saw it differently, who was able to then take what he saw, synthesize it, make critical sense of it, and then move while everybody else stood still. And when we say that Hajj is a journey of the hearts, and Hajj is a Hajj of the hearts, that's a pilgrimage that every one of us undertakes as a traveler in this world, beyond even what it is that people go to the cities of Mecca on a daily basis, on a yearly basis. And there's a constant need for that refinement and transformation internally. And when you're in that space where you're able to now go through that, and you're surrounded by all of these people who you could fully get away with never being around, it creates an opportunity for a much needed ingredient to now start to experience and understand just what is important and what is not important, and what kind of psychological shackling can happen to an individual when there is just the presence of systems and structures that benefit from keeping us away from each other rather than coming close together in ways that make sense. And I think that's why it's so important for us to also be a part of virtual gatherings that are like this, where physical separation at a time of COVID-19 should not necessitate spiritual disconnectedness. And you have full opportunity to jump in on virtual communal experiences and essentially be a part of communities that might be miles away from you, that otherwise you couldn't experience at other times of the year. And what Dustin is doing and what his team is doing is so important to support in that regard. That a gateway for us to start to break down the obstacles that keep us away from each other and to enhance that pilgrimage of our inside, so that we are not simply those who do not engage in acts of racial injustice, but we become those who speak out and become those who break down and dismantle everything that creates and gives nurturing to the systems and structures that breed racial injustice. And so where you can support him in the amazing work that he's doing, and to allow for the crowdfunding that he has for the Digital Media Academy to be something that reaches a goal, you definitely want to be able to do that. As a starting point, just wherever you're at right now, take a chance and take some courage to go and sit with somebody who you could fully get away with never speaking to, but not in a way where you come to impose your own experience or your own understanding, but with an air of understanding that says that there's something that you can actually learn by simply listening to someone. And the gain is going to be better for you than anyone else, because it takes a different kind of courage to go and stand with somebody and meet them where they are, as opposed to waiting for them to come to you. and the opportunity for empathy to increase and reaching an epitome of selflessness that puts a full halt to any type of selfishness, whatever feeds it and fuels it, and you start to simply just understand the experience of the other through the other. You'll start to nurture that love that can become that entry point. And for us, God becomes the center point of all of it, that everybody is able to have a relationship with God, and with that God being the God of everything, that means that no one is more or less entitled to having that relationship with Allah. And that becomes that centering factor that connects people together on this global level, that moves beyond just the simplistic connection of what exists in terms of shared externals, and everything that a journey like the Hajj calls to, that is about shared internals, shared values, shared hearts. And so inshallah ta'ala, may Allah Azza wa Jal guide us and protect us. May He bless us with knowledge that benefits us. May He bless us with a tawfiq to understand and implement that knowledge into our daily lives. May He guide and bless us all. Wallahu ta'ala alam wa billahi tawfiq. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuhu.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jazakallah khair, Imam Khalid. Beautiful to see you as always. So next, we're going to turn to our sister Mesa Hamoud, who has a really amazing campaign real quick, and then we're going to bring in the group discussion with Alia Sharrief and Khalid Alexander, inshallah. Sister Mesa, assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for having me, Dustin, and I think also...
Thank you for being here with us. Tell us about this amazing project that you have going on in Kenya about preserving Islam and to help this forgotten Quran school.
Well, I discovered this school in a town called Shela on the island of Lamu. And my whole intention to go to this island was actually not this project at all. It was for something completely different, and it didn't work out. And because of that, I discovered this wonderful community that really they follow all of the tenets of Islam to the T. It's a community that I believe needs to be preserved. I was able to, when I was there, I was able to meet with there are two madrasas, actually. It's a community that has, families that live in it, very small. This island and this particular town, they don't have roads, they don't have cars. It's very simple. And the children of these families, they attend the madrasa. And when I was there, I was able to visit the girls' madrasa first. It's called Madrasat al-Huda. I was able to visit the girls' madrasa first. And my experience with that madrasa was just, I cannot describe. It was something life-changing for me. I found these young children that are Huffaz al-Quran. They speak Arabic better than I, and I'm originally Arab from Egypt. Their Quran is perfect tajweed. It really moved me so much. And I was able to meet with the founder of the madrasa for the girls, Al-Huda Lil Banat, who was 104 years old when I was there. And I think that was more life-changing for me than anything. I think this is what got me on this track of trying to save this community, because she was on her deathbed and I didn't know. I met her and 2 days later she passed away. So I feel that in a way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala didn't allow the original reason why I went there to to work out because he wanted me there for a different purpose. And I can't say really that I discovered this community. I mean, there are many people that know about it, but because it is within a non-Muslim country, which is Kenya, they have no national support. The only help they get is from donations from, people in Kenya, obviously Muslims that donate, and that's it. The outside world doesn't know anything about this community. What I wanted to say was I lost my track of
Well, may Allah bless your work. It's super beautiful. Of course, Lamu is known to be the island of the Mawlid, where they have one of the great Mawlid celebrations in the entire world.
Yes,
every year.
True.
And there are people who preserve tradition. So we're excited. We're really excited that you're doing this work with this Quran school. May Allah bless your work. Any final thoughts?
What I wanted to say, which is really important, is that there is a tourism on this island that is threatening this community from keeping their Islam. And these young children that finish school, they don't have any, that finish madrasa, don't have any skills or anything. So this madrasa that is right there now is not built entirely, and it's built in a very hazardous way. So we need to demolish and rebuild it. So we have Madrasat al-Banat and Madrasat al-Banin, and we want to start with Madrasat al-Banin first, because that's the one that is worse than the other madrasa.
Inshallah. Jazakallah khair. May Allah bless your work and give you tawfiq, and may Allah bless all the children there and allow the community to maintain their Islam. Inshallah, it was a blessing to be with you and to capture even part of the sweet breeze of that island of Lamu. Inshallah, we can all visit there one day. Ameen. Inshallah.
I appreciate the opportunity. Jazakallah khair, and thank you to you, and thank you to the good. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam. All right, alhamdulillah. Like I said, we started in New York. We just went to Kenya and got the beautiful breezes from Lamu. Now let's go down the road a bit to San Diego. I'm also in San Diego, to our brother Khalid Alexander. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah.
Beautiful to see you. MashaAllah.
Good to be seen. I was checking out your beard game over there, mashallah.
Yeah, man, it's growing since we last saw each other.
Some of us are blessed. We don't have to put much effort. I've been working on this for close to 30 years, man.
I didn't even know. This is the first time I tried to grow a beard, so I'm a full beard, alhamdulillah. Thank you, brother. Blessing to see you. Now we'll bring in Sister Alia Sharrief in Oakland. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum. How are you?
Good. It's a blessing to see you as well. So yeah, you both do really incredible work, and I'm so happy you both could join us for this conversation. Let's start with, the theme again is this idea of racial justice within Islam. How do we live that as Muslims? And especially in this season of Hajj, in these days of Dhul Hijjah, what are our intentions for this year in the midst of, the reality of this Black Lives Matter movement, these growing movements in the United States? How do we as Muslims fit in? Tell us about the work you're both doing. Who wants to start first?
Let's start with the sister, inshallah. Sister Alia.
Yeah. Sister Alia. Bismillah.
I think that it's a very easy question. It's a hard question, but it's a very easy solution. But it takes living it. I think so many times we have this discussion of anti-Blackness in Islam, and we end up at the same place. So where we fit in with this racial injustice movement is to be honest with us as Muslims. There's a lot of the things that we complain about from Black Muslims, or it's called complaining, that we've been dealing with for a long time. Things that are simple as returning salams. The problem with the communities and the liquor stores, the problem with, the anti-Blackness that is within our masjids. I feel like the best thing that we could do, like Allah tells us, is to fix the problem within so we can really win. And a lot of the times I feel like, you know, some of us, you know, get a bit clueless or don't know where to start, when really it's about listening to Black voices, listening to Black Muslims, listening to our story. And for a lot of the time, we've been pretty much here, but we talk about erasure a lot. And if you check the hashtag on Twitter, hashtag being Black and Muslim, it's a whole chronicle of stories from Black Muslims. And I think as far as just in regards to your question of where do we start, I think we have to start with honesty. We have to start with the root problem. And we have to start with how white supremacy has affected us in this ummah.
Yeah, that's powerful. Thank you. And sorry, and I didn't give introductions for those who don't know our speakers. Sister Alia Sharrief is a hip hop artist and a journalist and does really, really incredible work. Our brother Khalid Alexander is a professor, and he's also the founder and president of Pillars of the Community, one of my favorite organizations in the country, doing really, really incredible work that you all should know about, and especially focused on formerly incarcerated communities. So brother Khalid, the same question: how in these days are you thinking about racial justice? What are your intentions for this year to continue the work that you're doing?
You know, alhamdulillah, I took my Shahada in 1995. So I'm not a math expert, but, you know, it's over 20 years that I've been Muslim. And so kind of this conversation of what does it mean to be Black in the Muslim community, what does it mean to be Black in America, has always been important to me. Even before Islam, coming from a family, my mom's African-American, my dad's from Denmark. And so the question of, you know, of Blackness, the question of personal identity has always been important. And I, like many other people who embraced Islam in large extent because of the racial perspective that Islam brings, and because of the idea of social justice, equality, and brotherhood that comes along with Islam. One of the first things we notice as we become Muslim, particularly at that time, was the things that brought us into Islam often are not represented in the Muslim communities that we visit and that we become a part of. So, for example, you know, many of us embraced Islam through learning about Malcolm X, rahimullah, al-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, you know, learning about Muhammad Ali, rahimullah, and all of these other characters. But when we come into the Muslim community, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses us to be able to embrace the spiritual aspects of Islam, often the social justice aspect of Islam is missing. And as Sister Alia has spoken of, the relationship to race and colorism that we see in the Muslim community, of course, is one of those things that present itself fairly quickly. I think it's important, however, that as we talk about race and we talk about racism in the Muslim community, that we make a distinction between racism, white supremacy, and what we have in the United States. But you can't have that conversation without having a conversation about colonialism and imperialism. And often what we dub as racism in the Muslim community, we do a disservice by trying to equate that with white supremacy or imperialism and colonialism, because often the distinction between the two is, you know, white supremacy is an exclusion. It's white is correct, white is the center of everything, and everything else is excluded, as opposed to what we see often in the immigrant communities, which is, it's an exclusion, but it's an exclusion in an attempt to be accepted. So often we have Muslim community members, immigrants, and in their countries of origin, who their version of quote unquote racism or colorism is really an attempt to be embraced by white supremacy. And that distinction is important because it's a power distinction. It's a historical distinction based off of the colonialism that we've seen of Europeans inside of those areas. And often Arabs and lighter-skinned Muslim communities are the ones who fall victim to it the most, because they can easily be duped into thinking that they have a chance of being accepted into that community. One of the first things that became apparent after 9/11 is you had all of these people, these Muslims, who had changed their name to Sam, they changed their name to Mo, they changed their names, and had assumed that they had assimilated into American society. I remember going to masjids and seeing, khutbahs about Muslims for George Bush. He certainly cured us of that disease. But what was shocking for people after 9/11 is these people who had assumed they had been assimilated and assumed they had been accepted by white society realized, no, that they were just Negroes. They were just black people like everybody else, regardless of their skin tone or color. So I think that conversation is important. And like the sister said, it's important that we have honest conversations about our relationship to race, our relationship to social justice, our relationship to equity, and what it means to be white, and more importantly, what it means to be non-white, and what our role as Muslims is in that environment here in the United States.
Yeah, that's really deep. And I think that it manifests itself in a lot of different ways in the community, right? One of which is, like you said, you both mentioned the internalization of white supremacy, and the why is it that it's so difficult for the community to have conversations about white supremacy, right? It's like people are starting to say Black Lives Matter, but still we're not talking about the internalized levels of oppression. Like, I'll give a good example is after what happened after the massacre that took place in New Zealand, police were already in our masajid around the country, but they took that opportunity, police departments, to go even deeper in many of the Muslim communities. And unfortunately, after all the protests that happened recently, there was a major mosque in Texas where they invited the chief of police into the masjid to give a webinar in the midst of everything that happened. So Khalid, I know you all have been working on a webinar series about policing in the United States. Sister Alia, I know you've been in the street, and I know you support many organizations. Can you talk? Let's start with you, Alia. Talk a bit about the work that you all have been doing in the streets and these issues in the Muslim community, because we know that unfortunately every masjid is not the Lighthouse Mosque in Oakland, right? Where it's so much beauty and there's true welcoming sense, and police do not have an open door the way that they do at so many of these suburban mosques throughout the United States.
Absolutely. My perspective has always been interesting with police and masjids. I am originally from Sacramento, and I was with a masjid out there from the beginning. Our whole entire family, it went from an apartment to a warehouse they bought and turned it into a masjid. As soon as we got the right to have the masjid there, and we got the land and everybody's moving in and decorating the masjid, they actually in Sacramento, the Sacramento PD set up their station like literally right next door as soon as our masjid came into play. And from there, this was around the time of 9/11 and after 9/11, and there were people coming, in the masjid saying they were somebody and they were really someone else. And, the infiltration and the threat was there from a young age. And I'm sure a lot of Muslims can relate to that big brother figure that we feel are watching the police, where you still have many situations in masjids that are unprotected and discriminated against. But I think that in the light of it, it is important to recognize the relationship that we have with these police officers in masjids. We can't be too careful. As a Black woman, getting the perspective of, hey, be careful, the police could be watching your masjid, or you could be on a list just because you're going to a masjid and you're Muslim, having to deal with that as just Muslims in general, and then turning around and being a Black Muslim, my first time personally, hearing the N-word towards me was at a masjid. And education was really important, because after that happened, it was like, okay, let's get to the root of this. In regards to the streets, as far as my work and the people that I work with out here in the Bay Area, it is important to be here for every situation when it comes down to Black lives, brown lives, violence. Police have been killing for a very, very, very long time. George Floyd was one of the many killings that are caught on camera, but there's a lot of killings that have been going on. And as Muslims, we go into the community representing Islam, but we don't, come to try to get you to believe our beliefs just because we're here. We're literally here for the community. We're literally here for the people. So there's been so many mothers of assassinated sons and victim of police terrorism. There's been just random shootings, and we're there for families that have been victims. A lot of the times they say that the people who are going to be left behind in the new future are those who aren't technology savvy. So we come and we try to give them anything they need to help them spread their message and spread the word. As Muslims that deal with seeing all of these victims of police brutality, I will say that it is very sad sometimes, because sometimes it's like the Muslims will not show up unless a person is Muslim. For example, from my city, Stephon Clark, he was killed by a police officer, and there was no real Ummah outcry until we found out he was Muslim, and then the Ummah was present. So I feel like with my role in the streets and the people I work with, we try to be there as Muslims, regardless if it's a Muslim situation or not. Islam is very pro-life and human rights and the struggle, and Allah is not on the side of the oppressor. So anytime somebody's being oppressed in the community, in the neighborhood, we're always, on the front lines, just representing what we stand for as Muslims, and also giving people a broader perspective. As a Black Muslim, I've had people try to separate my identity, like, if you're Muslim, be Muslim. If you're Black, be Black. But, there's no separating the two when we're attacked on all different kind of forefronts. So sorry if that didn't answer your question. I got a little,
Oh, it was good. It was great. Khalid.
Yeah, alhamdulillah, man, may Allah reward you for inviting me. I'm glad to be able to share the, I was going to say stage, but I guess screen with Sister Alia, because it sounds like the work that she's doing up there is extremely important, and the type of work that really we need to be able to see happening kind of across the United States. Again, one of the things that I think a lot is about our identity as Muslims in the United States, and what does it mean to be Muslim in the United States? And I think that Allah has blessed us with large immigrant communities to be able to create masajids around the U.S. where it's become easy to practice Islam and to pray and to listen to talks. But I think there's a difference between practicing Islam and establishing Islam. And the type of work that Sister Alia is doing and talking about, standing up for anybody who's being oppressed, really, I think, is going to be the only Muslim identity that is going to continue to help us be able to establish Islam in the United States, so that Islam is not looked at as a foreign presence or a presence of foreigners who've come over here, but actually is recognized as a very important part of American or U.S. history. Pillars of the Community is a Muslim 501(c) religious organization, but the majority of the work that we do is very secular. We have a musalla, we have a masjid, and we have some programs for Muslims, but most of the work that we do is actually in the community, working with non-Muslims and advocating for non-Muslims, in particular people who have been negatively impacted by law enforcement. So we do a lot of work with gang members, documented gang members. We address kind of issues of gang enhancements, racial profiling, and other things. But the relationship, one of the things that we still struggle with is the relationship of Muslims and the police is a complex one, because on the one hand, we do have masajids, particularly in outside of what I'll call urban communities, outside of lower income Black communities, that actually appreciate law enforcement's presence and invite law enforcement onto their property to, whether it's to park a police car or, coffee with a cop or something like that. But that feels strongly that we should have a relationship with law enforcement in order to protect us, particularly from white supremacist behavior. And it's a valid concern. But of course, there's a huge disconnect between that type of relationship and the, quote unquote, Muslim community and the experiences and the trauma that, people in neighborhoods like Southeast San Diego, Oakland, and neighborhoods like it all over the US, and their experience with police. And so if you come from a different economic background and you have not experienced the same thing that, Black people in this country have experienced growing up, it's very difficult to recognize that, perhaps the biggest social justice issue, perhaps the biggest Islamic issue, frankly, for us as Muslims, is the oppression of Black and brown people by the hands of law enforcement. And we shouldn't be surprised at that. I mean, we've all grown up and been watching movies and TV shows where we're constantly bombarded with images of the police being the good guys and as Black people being the bad guys. But as Muslims, we have a duty and a responsibility to look past kind of the propaganda that we see and really study and recognize the institutions that we have, to a certain extent, that we seek to assimilate into, and see how those institutions are actually complicit with a history of rape, violence, genocide, and brutality throughout the country. A good example of this, I think, is and anything that happens to communities, to Black communities and poor communities, you better believe can happen to the Muslim community. And really, Muslims are just one more product in this kind of American or U.S. Factory of the other, of the savage. And so it's just a matter of time between the same kind of police brutality that we see perpetrated upon Black people in Southeast San Diego is used to oppress Muslim communities wherever they're at. A good example of that is CVE, right? A government program that goes into Muslim community to say, hey, we want you just to pay attention to the bad guys and let us know if there's any bad guys happening. And, we even have scholars that will defend kind of the use of CVE, and they have reasons, I think, and they have valid reasons. I think it's a discussion that can be had. I remember one scholar said, well, what the sister in the street doesn't know, in the hood doesn't know or care about, CVE, which is true, but they know about COINTELPRO. They know about gang suppression units. They know about how informants and undercover police are used to destroy our communities every day. And so if we had a better grasp of what the communities that, Sister Alia is a part of and participates in. My mom is actually from Oakland. She was a member of the Black Panther Party, the Oakland chapter of the Black Panther Party. So people who are aware of that history, the history of the United States, who are aware of the interactions with police and the reality of what policing looks like on our streets, I think will be way more open to understanding why we should be cautious to invite law enforcement on any level into our communities. And again, why it's absolutely necessary that we are there on the front lines when it comes to advocating for and protecting people who are directly impacted by the negative and brutal arm of law enforcement and white supremacy in this country.
And mashallah, exactly. And to go and I want you to go a little bit deeper there, just so people have a reference. Could you mention the series that you all have been producing? I think it's been probably the best thing out there in the Muslim-led community. Some of the best stuff I've seen anywhere about I think it's now a 5-part series about policing, and also where people can find it.
8, yeah. So we've been doing a series around kind of policing in the United States and what that looks like, and diving into conversations around what does defunding the police mean, what does abolition of prisons, what does abolition of policing. What does that mean? What's the history of policing? What is the impact on people who are most directly in contact with kind of the negative arm of law enforcement? And so, yeah, I think we have 8 series. They're all about they're all about an hour and a half long. We have academic scholars who participate in that. We have community members, gang members, formerly incarcerated people, advocates, organizers, lawyers, people on all different levels who participate in those conversations. And unlike a lot of political education classes, when we have political education, we don't have an ideology or any particular perspective that we're pushing. What we push is this idea that what I say is shit is complex. I put shit in quotes because it's not a cuss word if you put it in quotes. And that we really need to be able to think critically about these issues and understand the issues in their entirety. So you could go on our Facebook page. I think most of them you can still find where they were live streamed. And we also have links to watch the recorded versions of it. Yeah.
So I think, the issue with the community is the thank you for that. And Allah bless you for all the work that you all are doing there in the digital space. I think it's so important that we have these gatherings and really deep, knowledge sharing sessions in these times. I think that there's a lot of well-intended people in the Muslim community, of course. And I think there's a lot of masajid who are really looking to figure out what they can do in these times to change conversations, to put, Black Muslims more at the center of the masajid, and recognize the historical injustice that's been done by the immigrant community to African American Muslims. So what is some advice if like a masjid came to you and asked you, what could we do to change this situation, to take this more seriously, to take racial justice more serious in the masjid, to create a more welcoming space? And this isn't just about race, also it's about race and gender, of course. And like you said, Alia, as an African-American woman, what would your advice be? We'll start with you, Alia.
My advice would first and foremost be to educate yourself. If you're not a Black Muslim, if you're not Black, educate yourself on the history of this country, America, white supremacy. It's important because a lot of people have insidious behaviors that have been picked up by this system that, they might not even understand what's going on. So education is a must. I just was thinking the other night when I was just going over just different thoughts about being a Black Muslim. Every Black person in America pretty much knows that the history that they give us from start was, slavery. And a lot of the times we have to clarify as Black people in America, we were already here. My history didn't start with slaves. I'm from royalty. And that is a lot of the ways that mind state breaks a lot of that spell on you that, hey, all you know is Harriet Tubman and this person that we tell you about. So actually educating ourselves that we're not slaves. So going to the Muslim perspective, I feel like a lot of the times with Blackness, as far as the start in Islam, it starts with slavery as well, because Bilal obviously was incredible, and we're so thankful for Bilal and for Bilal's story, but that can't be the main narrative push. It's a very sensitive time. And again, Black people didn't start as slaves. And I feel like we have to have a reframing and rethinking of how we explain Blackness in Islam. There's so many examples from the Prophet, peace be upon him, the Black mother, to all of the examples that we have. So it shouldn't just be one story of a slave that, got to sing the Idan. And obviously with a deeper meaning, we understand how important that is and how beautiful it is and what an honor that is. But, to people that are ignorant to that fact, it again pinpoints back to, oh yeah, they started a slavery, which I think justifies the treatment that Black people receive or that Black people are going through. It's similar to in the Bible, you know, when they say the Ham story, the curse, you know, it's always a justification why darkness is a curse, pretty much. So I do think we need to educate. There are a lot of funds in the Muslim community that, you know, I've been to in Oakland, a lot of demonstrations that were highlighting the Black existence in Islam. And a lot of the imams, the African imams, were just venting that this money that is gathered for all these different things, it never hits the hood. It never hits poverty. It never hits the poor communities. So, you know, also expanding the branch to your fellow neighbor, because, you know, it's in Islam, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, told us specifically that we are tribes. We are made into tribes so we can get to know each other, not so we can assimilate into each other, or not so we can erase our history and take on one perspective, one garb, one clothes. And, you know, we have to stop as Muslims. We can't be afraid to get in the hood. You know what I'm saying? Malcolm X came from the hood. Malcolm X had a story before he was Malcolm X, Detroit Red. So I feel like we need to embrace the youngins that are coming to the masjid that want to learn, the ones that, you know, might not be as Muslim to you because they dress a certain way, or they talk a certain way, or they have a bit of slang. But we need to embrace, enfold all of us. There's many levels to Blackness, and it's not just, you know, Obama Black. There are levels to it, and we need people that are equipped. We need Black teachers in position to embrace these people when they come to the masjid, because too many times I have heard so many stories and about Black Muslims being mistreated just at the masjid. When we talk about treatment at the masjid, and, you know, I have several friends who no longer go to the masjid because of that reason. They no longer wear a hijab because of that reason. I know as Muslims, you know, the Prophet, peace be upon him, is the best of all examples. And, you know, that's who we all strive to be. And, you know, we're not supposed to, we were taught we're not supposed to slam another Muslim and put him under the bus and, you know, backbite and everything. So I feel like we get into a pattern, a comfortability of covering for each other because we don't want to slam each other down because we're both Muslims. You know, the word anti-Blackness, you know, and white supremacy is tiptoed around. But, you know, we really have to be honest in order to really break through all the barriers of what's holding us back. You know, I think money has a part to play with it, skin tone, power. So I would say in the masjid, you know, if a masjid came to me with what could they do to educate or to help the situation, that would be my personal suggestion.
MashaAllah. That's really great. Khalid, how would you answer that question if a masjid came to you and said, actually, aren't you all starting a masjid in Southeast San Diego now?
Yes.
So even in thinking about, then maybe it's a different part of a question, thinking and founding that space, how do you think about how you create it as a welcoming space, as a social justice oriented space? You can answer both, but I think that it's unique that you're actually starting a space like that right now.
Yeah, and forgive me because I'm gonna have to jump off. I have a hard quit because I have another appointment. But yeah, let me try to answer both of those, and I think they kind of segue well. So when you first asked the question, my initial reaction was nothing. Like I said, I became Muslim in 1995, and I spent a long time thinking about and having conversations with other quote unquote new Muslims about our frustration with immigrant Muslims and their kids. I guess now we're going into second and third generation. And they're not being involved in the communities that we came from and the communities that we love. And honestly, that's an important point to look at and to discuss. But honestly, I don't want them walking around Southeast San Diego. And I feel like as a Black American Muslim that I have a responsibility to establish Islam. And I don't see that same responsibility on the shoulders of, you know, our immigrant brothers and sisters in the same way. And I think a lot of the time conversations around, and Sister Alia alluded to this, conversations around blackness, conversations about Bilal radiallahu anhu, they could often be patronizing. And they buy into this narrative of, oh, these poor black folks, aren't they lucky that they embraced Islam and now can begin to be uplifted from where they were. I mean, frankly, I'm very proud of my history coming from slavery. And I think that history is the most beneficial history that we have to offer the immigrant Muslims, because while some people look at the history of slavery as one of oppression and of being of abuse and belittlement, I look at it as a history of resistance. And you cannot be a successful non-white person in this country without understanding the importance of that history of resistance. And so I think we need to be careful as masajids and as individuals who, reach out to black people to show how much they love black people or how much Islam loved Bilal radiallahu anhu. I mean, Africans and people of African descent have been a part of Islam outside of the history of slavery. They've been a part of the leadership of Islam outside of slavery. And again, this is something that Sister Alia did a really good job of articulating, both in the Arab continent and in the African continent. And so when we talk about black in the United States and our concepts of what it means to be black in the United States, as those of you looking at me can tell, is very different than a black or African in other countries and what they perceive as blackness. And that history is a history rooted in slavery. That history is a history that is rooted in intentional measures being made to differentiate, quote unquote, black people from or white people from everybody else. And so I no longer look at the masajids and the anti-blackness and the colorism that we may see there, and instead my focus is more on Black American Muslims, those Black American Muslims who are descendants of slaves in this country, and our responsibility to be leading immigrant Muslims and other masajids into the maturation of Islam in the United States. You can't have Islam established in the United States without understanding the racial history of the United States. You can't have an establishment of Islam in the United States without recognizing the importance of resistance to white supremacy. And frankly, that resistance to white supremacy is just as American, if not more American, as racism and apple pie. I'm proud to be an American, but the American that I'm proud of is in the lineage of Frederick Douglass, Nat Turner, Malcolm X. The America I'm proud of is not apple pie and apple pie and red, white, and blue, but it's an America of bean pies and Black power. And so again, I think it's important that we embrace kind of our role as a unique people in the United States and as leaders of establishing Islam here. Now, if people really do want to help that effort, you need to donate, man. You need to come out your pockets and help support communities and people who are doing the work in communities that kind of represent that history and represent that struggle. You need to look at Black American Muslims as an asset and learn from them, as opposed to this group of people that are so lucky to have been embraced by your culture. Because in fact, the opposite is true. Immigrant Muslims have an amazing opportunity to be able to learn from and benefit from the rich culture of Black American Islam. And then lastly, what I'll say is that Sister Alia talked about the importance of education. It's important to educate yourself on history, not only history in the United States, but you need to understand your own history and your own history of colonization and why it is that you think that light-skinned people are prettier than dark-skinned people, and why it is that you think that people who immigrate to the United States or that people who have more money are better than people who don't have more money. That's not an Islamic perspective. That's something that you were taught. And so you have to understand, who is it that colonized you? Who is it that colonized your thinking? And how does that colonization relate to the struggles of indigenous people in this country, to Black Americans in this country, and to the history of kind of repression and, more importantly, resistance that we see all over the place? So educating ourselves on our own history, where we come from, what are our personal family background. Islam shouldn't be seen as, and again, Sister Alia is totally on point when she talks about recognizing that, you know, we come from different tribes, we come from different nations, and that's something that we should be proud of. We should embrace that. We should understand where those things are from, and those things are totally positive. Me being proud of being Black, I don't mean proud in a kibber way, but me not being ashamed, maybe is another way to say it. Me not being ashamed of being Black is an important part of being a Muslim, in the same way that not being ashamed of being a Pakistani, an Indian, an Arab, or, you know, any of these things should also be an important thing. Those things get in the way when they take you away from the deen. So if you're so proud of being Pakistani or Indian or Arab that you can't relate to and recognize the humanity in others, then, you know, that's haram. And similarly, if you're so proud of being Black that you can't recognize the humanity of others, then that's haram also. But they are not automatically exclusive. So yes, we have to educate ourselves. We have to understand our backgrounds. And we have to understand the history of resistance and stop looking at Black people as if you're the one who are blessing them. If anything, you're blessed to have the opportunity to listen from and learn from Black, not only Black American Muslims, but non-Muslims as well, because we have a rich history of education, of resistance, of power, of morality, that is hard to find any other similarities in really anywhere in the world. Again, I talked a long time, and I feel bad that I have to jump off right now because this is a very important discussion. And again, may Allah reward you, Sister Alia. I'm blessed, you know, just to be up here with you, and may Allah reward you with the work that you're doing and continue to do it, because the work that you're doing and the work that this sister is doing, everybody, that's what's going to be establishing Islam in the United States. It's not going to be beautiful Quran recitation. It's not going to be beautiful masajids. It's not going to be any of those things, although those things are great. Those things are wonderful. You know, those things are part of the beauty of Islam. But that's not what's going to make Islam stand out here in the United States. What's going to stand out is, hey, you know what? There's these people who actually care about me more than other people care about me. There's these people who recognize my humanity and my struggle more than other people recognize that humanity and struggle. And this is for affluent people and well-off, comfortable people as well as not, because those people who sit by and allow for these injustices to take place in front of them without doing anything are honestly, you know, losing out on their own humanity. And again, I think Black Americans are the key to really understanding that position and being able to break free from some of the shackles of colonialism, imperialism, and U.S. racism that we see every day. So again, may Allah reward you, Brother Dustin, Sister Alia.
Yeah.
I got to jump off because I'm going to get yelled at by my wife.
Yeah.
And, hey, that's an important part of Islam too.
Yes.
Thank you, brother. Allah bless you in your work. It's great to see you. You can check out Pillars of Community. Alia, let's stay on for a few more minutes and we'll wrap up. Inshallah, I want you to give your final shout outs and everything as well.
Yes, mashallah, very powerful, brother. It just feels so good to come together with people on the same mind state with social justice and Islam and black lives and the education of anti-Blackness and those who are actually boots on the ground, you know, putting it into motion. So thank you so much, Brother Khalid, for everything you do and for really being out here and speaking up. So mashallah, that was an honor and a blessing to have a conversation with the brother.
Yeah, mashallah. No, and I think that there's a few points from what he said, right? One is thinking about education in a much deeper way about how we teach our children as Muslims living in the United States and Muslims around the world. Because unfortunately, you have school curriculums that literally cut and paste Eurocentric curriculums, and Muslims just consume those things. And so you wonder why we internalize white supremacy. Well, if we learn from a white supremacist education structure, but then we call it Islamic, that's actually more damaging to a young person than if they were to go to a public school and at least their parents could explain away what it is that they're learning.
Absolutely. It's programming at its finest. You know, I was teaching Muslim kids before, and we had the curriculum from the school district. And, you know, it was just like, what's going on here? You know, yeah. we're Muslims and we know this, what Columbus, huh? You know, so yeah, that is something the brother Khalid made a good point about educating our children, especially when we have the power to. I feel personally blessed because my mom, you know, she always put us on game. I went to public school my whole life, but, you know, she always told us before we went to school, look, Columbus did not do this. Look, you are not a slave. You didn't come from slavery. Black history didn't start with slavery, should I say. You know, so just, you know, the public school, I understand it's convenient and some parents can't afford to homeschool and to educate that way. But if you are sending your child to public school, just at least, you know, pre-prep them for what they're going to receive, because I've literally seen, you know, going from the 6th grade, going to the 7th grade, and complete personalities change, morals change. Like 7th and 8th grade is especially hard for youngins. That's when all kind of things come into play, you know, parties, drugs, sex talk. And as a Muslim, you know, especially a Muslima, in the midst of all that, I was always just like, oh my God, what is going on? Like, you know, I didn't learn this part at home. So we have to really be ready. This, you know, it's not a game. Everything isn't, you know, Barney and Friends. Like, we have to be honest.
Yeah, no, Amin Asser, the founder of Noor Kids, he was on the program a few days ago, and he made a really important point where he said, look, people ask us all the time, should my kids go to Islamic school? Should they go to public school? And he said, what matters is the parents at home, how we raise them. So really it is about correcting the history that the young people are learning. But at the same time, I mean, I've always dreamed of like an ethnic studies Islamic school, right? A school really rooted in the stories of our communities in the United States from the grassroots, while also teaching Islam in a traditional and beautiful way. So inshallah, those types of things manifest in the next generation. And then the final point that I wanted to make, you know, and I don't know if you have any reflections on it, is really the intersection of all of these things, right? Because living down here in San Diego, part of the work that I was doing was at the what we call the border mosque. And part of the community started complaining about a certain aspect of it, saying that, you know, that's not our community, quote, our community. When we had found Muslim-banned communities stuck in Tijuana seeking asylum in the United States, right? And so the layers of racial injustice, it also has to do with the bourgeoisie nature of American Muslim politics that have just where we've internalized Democratic and Republican Party talking points. And so I think the work of all the grassroots organizers like yourself, like Khalid, is just so important, right? And the other piece as well is that with policing, it cannot be separated from the wars that the United States is waging around the world, because literally the Iraq War, the U.S. buys all this military equipment, sends it over to Iraq. The war ends for the most part. They send all that stuff back, and it ends up in all of our communities, right? The surveillance technology is developed in Iraq, is developed in these wars. So we talk about defund the police. We're talking about the military-industrial complex at the same time.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I completely, I mean, the police, they have to start being honest with themselves too. The ones who don't know need some education, because they started off as slave catchers. So, you know, just to even ask us to have all this sympathy and compassion and all this stuff, it's like, okay, well, let's start with the truth. Let's start with the original flyers of slave catching and wanted slaves. And, you know, let's be honest here. And I know that, I mean, I don't know. That to me is just, it's crazy. It's like, you know, you want us to put so much trust in something that never started for us. And, you know, then we get the blow from it, like, oh, you're not being you're cooperative, or you're not being a good citizen. But again, it's that insidious supremacy programming history that never really was ours, and it's been erased, depleted, revamped, to the point where I definitely have met some cool police officers and everything, but I'm like, the way they act, you would think they didn't know about the police force and the history. So it's a whole bunch of layers to this. The fact that all this stuff is coming into our communities, it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot for communities to handle. If the conversation is already tough to figure out which way we're going to go, the people who are actually living in it, we still have political prisoners that are Muslim who didn't do anything. Brother Mumia, we've been knowing for years, Mumia has been locked up and has innocent. It's proven he's innocent. Jamil Al-Amin, the forgotten Imam, as they call him, he's innocent. Somebody came out and confessed to what they did and he didn't do, and he's still locked up in prison. So I just feel like it's unfair, and we can't play two sides, and the police have to be honest with themselves too. You guys started as slave catchers. What was your effort to really change that narrative? Was there an effort? Because now there's guns in our community, and then how are they getting to these people, and then they're killing each other? So I can rant and vent about this all day long.
Yeah, and then let alone the funding, right? And people hate on this framing. Some people hate on this framing of defund the police, when the reality is another frame to it is fund our cities, right? Like, bring actual funding to our schools, bring actual funding for homelessness and mental health issues. And if you shift around budgets within cities, you can easily take away up to 50% of police budgets, and they'll still have their forces, right? But the point is that we have more whole cities, and those of you not in the United States watching around the world, like, the United States is legit falling apart. Like, we live in our cities, we see the level of homelessness, like in the Bay Area, Los Angeles, there's tent cities, not like one tent city. There's tent cities all over the place. I mean, so that's the point. And we didn't grow up like that, where it was so prominent. So we see the level of inequality changing by the day, the government response not doing anything in the midst of COVID, tens of millions of people unable to pay their rent. So it's all.
Let's not forget that these encampments, they are on land a lot of time that has been vacant for years. And, I've had sit down meetings with officials and everything about the homeless problem here in Oakland. And, it's just such a runaround and a circle. And then as soon as you do get a chance to advocate for them, next thing you know, at 2:00 in the morning, some big machine bulldozered and came and ruined all these tents, and they have to go to somewhere else. And this is going on during COVID as well. So, that is a very big problem, the homelessness population out here. I mean, I've been in tent cities, as they call them, and have recognized people that I knew and went to school with. And that's how bad it is. That's how bad it's good. And there are people who live in vans that are homeless now. They live in tents and they still work jobs. They have some hygiene routine. And you would see them and think they're well off, but they're actually full-time homeless. So it is a very horrible problem. I've never seen homelessness as bad as it is in the Bay Area right now. It's like you can't go anywhere without seeing a mass city.
Yeah, may Allah make it easy on all the people out sleeping outside. May Allah bless everybody. Final thoughts is, so can you tell people where to find your work and what you have coming up?
Yeah.
We could have just said, watch Black Heroes History, because that's a beautiful video, mashallah.
Mashallah. Yeah, you guys can also type in Black Heroes. I believe we're like the first video that comes up. Me and my sister Nina did that song. My name is Alia Sharrief. Boom, it's right there. Find me on Instagram, Twitter if you have any questions. I'm here. I really don't be on Facebook, but you know what I'm saying. So hit me up if you guys want to talk about it. You have anything you want to expand on from this conversation. Alia Sharrief, YouTube, and everything else. I have a lot of stuff coming up, a lot of projects, mostly just worrying about getting right with humanity. That's my biggest project that we try to do right now with the Hijabi Chronicles as well. And lastly, I wanted to say that for Eid al-Adha, we are actually with the Lighthouse Masjid having a virtual talent show. So all of the young Muslims who are out there who have some type of talent with comedy, singing, rapping, acting, whatever you want to present, we have a talent show, and here's the information. This is for the Isla community, thrown by the Isla community, and also the Lighthouse Masjid. So it's going to be really fun. And it's a lot of it's just a lot of good vibes. For a lot of the times, Muslims were told, music and all this stuff was haram. So this is one of the biggest tools to educate, which is music, and especially hip hop. So if you are interested, please send me a message in my inbox or find this flyer, and they will have all the information for you to how to enter. It is taking place this Saturday, this Saturday. So inshallah, if you could join us, all the ummah, all the talented young Muslim men and women, come on.
So people can still apply?
Yes, they can still apply. Applying is still open. I believe today is the cutoff, but we can make some exceptions. Cindyada, don't get mad. We can make some exceptions. But again, just look on my page and you'll find the flyer. And it'll be fun. It's Eid too. Eid celebrations. Let's turn up. Hello.
Right, hold on. I'm trying to pull it up.
Okay.
Final thing, final point. You can find it on Alia's page. You can also find it on the screen. We're going to be out. May Allah bless your work, inshallah.
May Allah bless you too, Destin. Thank you for bringing everybody together. Alhamdulillah, you do this so much, and we are so grateful for it. May Allah reward you.
It's a blessing to have the community together. There's the flyer.
Alhamdulillah, yes. Isla, and if you guys seen the Night of Power Isla, it was going down. So many different creative artists. So we're trying to keep that legacy going on and that culture going on within the community. So come on, y'all.
Mashallah. All right. Oh yeah, and happy birthday to Alia.
Hey.
Inshallah, may Allah bless you with many more. And continue to increase your voice, inshallah. All right, everyone, we're going to be out. Thank you all. We're going to run this final video about Dhul Hijjah challenge. We'll see you, Alia, soon, inshallah.
Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.
Hajj unites hearts from all over the globe. But Hajj this year is different. Most people who plan to go can't, and those who are going to observe from afar will be observing with an even greater yearning. In these uncertain times, community is more important than ever. While we may not be able to connect in person, we can still come together as a global ummah. Dhul Hijjah marks the best 10 days of the year. Let's make the most of it. Let's lift up the community through giving and connect our hearts like never before. Automatically donate to incredible causes this Dhul Hijjah. Automate your giving. Just set your daily giving goal. Choose where your auto giving goes. Select from thousands of inspiring campaigns. Track your impact. Turn charity into a newfound habit. Earn impact points for donating, sharing, and doing good. Join the challenge today.